MindShifter Audio Blog, a place for your mind to grow.
You're always west of somewhere. The dangerous myth of being right. Imagine you're standing in the middle of a vast library, but you can only see the books on one shelf. You've read every single volume on that shelf. You know them inside and out. You could quote passages, debate their merits, and defend their wisdom with passionate intensity. But here's the problem. You're convinced that your shelf contains all the books worth reading, while thousands of other shelves stretch out in every direction, filled with knowledge you'll never access. This is exactly how most of us navigate the world of perspectives. We become experts at our own limited view while remaining blind to the vast wealth of wisdom that surrounds us. We're standing west of infinite possibilities, yet we act like we're at the center of the universe. The truth is, we're all walking around with our own personal compass, convinced we're facing true north while everyone else is just lost. But what if the very thing we're certain about is exactly what's keeping us from accessing the wealth of wisdom that surrounds us every single day? Here's what I've come to understand. Every person you encounter is carrying a vault of experiences, insights, and hard-won wisdom that you'll never have access to any other way. That annoying coworker who micromanages everything, they might hold the key to understanding how to navigate organizational chaos. The friend who seems to overthink every decision, they could teach you how to spot risks you're blind to. I've watched brilliant entrepreneurs miss game-changing opportunities because they dismissed feedback from customers who didn't understand their vision. I've seen talented leaders plateau because they stopped learning from the people they were supposed to be leading. The cost of perspective blindness isn't just missing out on being right, it's missing out on becoming better. When we shut down other viewpoints, we're essentially saying, I'd rather be limited by what I already know than expanded by what I could learn. We're choosing the comfort of confirmation over the power of transformation. Think about perspective gathering like compound interest for your decision-making ability. Every viewpoint you genuinely consider adds another data point to your internal database. Over time, these accumulate into something incredibly valuable, pattern recognition that goes beyond your personal experience. I've observed people who've mastered this art, and they have an almost supernatural ability to navigate complex situations. They don't just rely on their own trial and error. They've borrowed from hundreds of other people's trials and errors. They've absorbed lessons from failures they never had to experience personally. A friend of mine built $1 million business by spending 2 years just listening to people complain about existing solutions in his industry. He didn't dismiss their complaints as whining. He collected them as precious gems. Each grievance became a feature in his product. Each frustrated rant became a marketing message that resonated perfectly with his target market. He essentially crowdsourced his path to success by treating every perspective as valuable intelligence. Here's something most people don't realize. Creativity isn't just about having original ideas. It's about connecting existing ideas in new ways. And the more perspectives you have access to, the more raw material you have for those connections. I've noticed that the most innovative solutions often come from people who've learned to see problems through multiple lenses simultaneously. They can look at a challenge through the eyes of a customer, an engineer, an accountant, and an artist all at once. This isn't because they're inherently more creative. It's because they've collected more viewpoints to draw from. When you dismiss someone's perspective, you're not only just rejecting their opinion, you're cutting yourself off from potential breakthrough insights that could only emerge from the collision of your thinking with others. There's another massive benefit to perspective gathering that often gets overlooked. It dramatically accelerates your emotional intelligence development. Every time you genuinely try to understand someone's viewpoint, you're building your capacity for empathy, which is arguably the most valuable skill in both personal and professional relationships. I've watched people transform their leadership abilities simply by starting to ask, "Help me understand your perspective on this," instead of immediately explaining why their approach was better. The magic wasn't just in the information they gathered, it was in how that question changed the entire dynamic of their interactions. People want to be understood before they're willing to understand. When you demonstrate that you're genuinely interested in their viewpoint, they become infinitely more receptive to yours. It's like a master key that unlocks cooperation, trust, and influence. One of the most practical benefits of collecting diverse perspectives is how it revolutionizes your ability to assess risk and opportunity. Your blind spots aren't just neutral gaps in your knowledge, they're potential landmines waiting to derail your plans. I've observed how successful investors make decisions. They don't just analyze numbers, they actively seek out people who disagree with their thesis. They want to know what they're missing, what they're not seeing, what could go wrong that they haven't considered. They treat opposing viewpoints like stress tests for their ideas. This isn't about becoming paralyzed by doubt or analysis paralysis. It's about making more informed decisions by acknowledging that your initial perspective, no matter how well researched, is still incomplete. Perhaps the most profound benefit of embracing multiple perspectives is how it deepens every relationship in your life. When you stop trying to convince people that your way is the right way and start getting genuinely curious about their way, something magical happens. Connection. I've seen marriages saved by couples who learn to approach their differences with curiosity instead of judgment. I've watched parents rebuild relationships with their adult children by asking questions instead of giving advice. I've observed friendships that were dying from constant debate come back to life when both parties started approaching their differences as opportunities to understand rather than opportunities to be right. The irony is that when you stop trying to change people's minds, you often end up influencing them more than you ever did through an argument. Understanding is magnetic. When people feel truly seen and heard, they naturally become more open to seeing and hearing you. Here's perhaps the most compelling reason to actively seek out different perspectives. It's the fastest way to acquire wisdom without having to live through every experience yourself. Wisdom traditionally comes from making mistakes, facing consequences, and learning from painful experience. But what if you could learn from other people's mistakes and consequences instead? I've noticed that the wisest people I know aren't necessarily the ones who've lived the longest or experienced the most. They're the ones who've learned to extract wisdom from everyone they encounter. They treat every conversation as a potential classroom and every person as a potential teacher. This isn't about being naive or gullible. It's about being strategic. Why limit yourself to the lessons from your own limited experience when you could access the collective wisdom of everyone around you? So how do you actually do this? How do you train yourself to see other perspectives as opportunities rather than threats? Start with genuine curiosity. Instead of listening to respond, listen to understand. Ask questions that help you see the world through their eyes. What led you to that conclusion? What experience shaped that belief? What am I missing about this situation? Look for the kernel of truth in every perspective, even ones that initially seem completely wrong to you. There's almost always something valuable buried in there, even if it's just understanding what not to do or what to avoid. Practice intellectual humility. Acknowledge that your perspective, no matter how well informed, is still just one piece of a much larger puzzle. This doesn't make your viewpoint less valuable. It makes it more accurate by acknowledging its limitations. When you truly embrace the practice of perspective gathering, you don't just become more knowledgeable, you become more powerful. You make better decisions because you're working with better information. You build stronger relationships because you're approaching people with curiosity instead of judgment. You spot opportunities others miss because you're seeing situations from angles they can't access. You're still west of somewhere, but now you know it. And that knowledge becomes your greatest strength, not your greatest limitation. Because when you know where you stand relative to everything else, you can navigate anywhere you want to go. The question isn't whether other perspectives have value. The question is whether you are wise enough to recognize that value and strategic enough to collect it. Your future self will thank you for every viewpoint you gathered, every assumption you questioned, and every moment you chose curiosity over certainty. Because here's the beautiful irony. The moment you realize you're always west of somewhere is the moment you finally find your true north.
The MindShifter Audio